Hi, I'm Olivia Hayes, and when my father threw me out of the house over a secret I had no control over, I thought my life was over. 15 years later, the knock on my door told me otherwise. It wasn't the sound of forgiveness. It was the sound of desperation. And for the first time, I was the one holding all the power. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me, where in the world are you watching from? I love seeing how far this story travels. The argument started the way they always did, in whispers. I was 18, sitting at the top of the stairs trying to finish a history paper. My parents were in the kitchen, their voices low and sharp. Usually it was about money or my brother Mark's latest screw-up. But this time, the words were different. "He can't keep asking for money, Sarah," my father David hissed. "It's been 18 years. "He's her father," my mother replied, her voice trembling. "He has a right to know how she is." "I'm her father," David snapped back, his voice cracking with a kind of fury I'd never heard before. "I raised her, I fed her, that man did nothing. He has no rights." My blood ran cold. Her father. They weren't talking about a relative. They were talking about me. I put my textbook down, the words blurring. I crept halfway down the stairs, hiding behind the wall, my heart pounding in my ears. "What if she finds out?" my mother whispered. "It would destroy her. It would destroy you." "She will never find out," he said. The finality in his tone was like a door slamming shut. But he was wrong. I already knew. The world tilted on its axis. Every family photo on the wall, every time he'd called me his little girl, every memory felt like a lie. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't stay hidden. I walked down the last few steps and stood in the kitchen doorway. They both froze, their faces pale. My mother looked like a trapped animal. My father's expression hardened into a mask of stone. "Who were you talking about?" I asked. My voice was small, a stranger's voice in my own home. My mother started to cry, a weak, helpless sound. "Olivia, baby. You weren't supposed to hear that." My father didn't flinch. He just stared at me, his eyes cold. "It's nothing. Go back to your room." "No," I said, feeling a surge of courage I didn't know I had. "You said her father. You meant my father. You're not my real dad?" The question hung in the air, heavy and ugly. My father's face twisted, not with sadness, but with pure rage. It was the look of a man whose deepest secret had been ripped into the light. He took a step toward me. "What did you hear?" "Enough," I whispered. That's when it broke. He didn't yell at my mother. He didn't try to explain. All that, stored up anger, all that resentment from a secret he'd carried for 18 years, came crashing down on me. "You want to know the truth?" he roared, his voice echoing in the small kitchen. "Fine. I'm not your father. Your mother had an affair. Your real dad was a deadbeat who wanted nothing to do with you. I was the fool who stepped up, the fool who gave you my name." Each word was a punch to the gut. I stumbled back, looking at my mother for help, for defense, for anything. She just stood there weeping into her hands. "So get out," he snarled. I blinked, confused. "What?" "Get out of my house," he shouted, his face red. "If I'm not your father, then this isn't your home. Get out." The world dissolved into a blur of motion and sound. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin, and dragged me toward the stairs. "Pack a bag. I want you gone in 10 minutes. I was sobbing, trying to pull away. "Dad, please, stop. It doesn't matter. You're still my dad." "Don't call me that," he spat, shoving me toward my room. "You're not my daughter. Not anymore." I fell into my room, scrambling to my feet. I could hear him stomping around downstairs, ranting. I looked around at the life I thought was mine, the posters on the wall, the worn-out stuffed animals, the photos of me with him, and my mom on my dresser. It was all a lie. I threw a few clothes into a suitcase, my hands shaking so badly I could barely zip it. My older brother Mark and younger sister Chloe were hiding in their rooms, the doors shut. No one came to help me. No one came to stop it. My mother was the worst part. As I dragged my suitcase down the stairs, she was standing by the front door, not looking at me. She was just staring at the wall, her arms wrapped around herself, as if she were the one who was cold. "Mom?" I pleaded, my voice breaking. "Please don't let him do this. Where will I go?" She finally turned to look at me, her eyes filled with tears, but also with a chilling emptiness. "He's just upset, Olivia. He needs time to cool down." "So, you're letting me leave?" I asked, the betrayal sharper than any of his anger. "You're just going to let him throw me out?" She didn't answer. She just watched as he yanked the front door open. The cold night air rushed in. "Out," he commanded. He threw my suitcase onto the porch. It landed with a dull thud. I stood there on the threshold, caught between the home that was no longer mine and a world I knew nothing about. I looked at him one last time, my heart shattering. "I loved you," I whispered. His face was hard, unforgiving. "You're nothing." "To me?" he said, and then he closed the door. I heard the lock click into place. The porch light went off, plunging me into darkness. I stood there, alone on the front step, with a suitcase and a secret that had cost me everything. The first few nights were a living nightmare. I had $74 in my wallet. I called a friend, sobbing, and she let me sleep on her couch. Her parents looked at me with pity, whispering in the kitchen when they thought I couldn't hear. I was a problem, a piece of gossip. After 3 days, I knew I couldn't stay. I found a women's shelter downtown. The room was clean but smelled of disinfectant and sadness. It was filled with women whose stories were harder than mine, but their pain didn't make mine any smaller. I lay on a narrow cot at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying my father's words over and over. "You're nothing to me." I got a job at a 24-hour diner, washing dishes and bussing tables on the night shift. The work was exhausting. My hands were raw, and I was always tired. I enrolled in a local community college, taking classes during the day and working at night. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. The loneliness was a physical ache. On my 19th birthday, I bought a single cupcake from a bakery and ate it in my tiny rented room. I waited for the phone to ring, hoping my mom or my siblings would call. They never did. Christmas was the worst. Through the diner window, I'd watch families laughing, their cars loaded with presents. I'd serve them coffee, smile, and wish them a happy holiday, then go back to the kitchen and fight back tears. I was a ghost watching a life that used to be mine. My family was celebrating somewhere, sitting around a tree, exchanging gifts. Did they even mention my name? Or had I been erased completely? I tried calling my mom once, a few months after I left. My sister Chloe answered. "Hello?" she said. "Chloe, it's me, Olivia." There was a long silence. I heard her whisper, "It's her." Then, my father's voice boomed in the background. "Hang up that phone, now!" The line went dead. That was it. I was truly on my own. The door wasn't just closed. It was bolted shut, and the family I knew was on the other side. For a full year, I was adrift in grief and exhaustion. I was just surviving, minute by minute, paycheck to paycheck. Then one day, something shifted. I was in the college library, hunched over a textbook, when I looked up and saw other students studying. They were tired too, but they had a focus, a direction. They were building something. I was just running from something. That night, I looked at myself in the cracked mirror of my small apartment bathroom. I looked tired and thin, with dark circles under my eyes. I saw the girl who had been thrown out, the girl who cried herself to sleep, and for the first time, I got angry. Not sad, but angry. How dare they? How dare they throw me away and expect me to disappear? How dare he decide I was nothing? I would not be nothing. That anger became my fuel. It burned away the sadness and left a core of hard, unyielding steel. I wasn't going to just survive anymore. I was going to succeed. Not for them, not to prove them wrong, but for me. Because I deserved a life that wasn't defined by their rejection. I doubled my course load. I studied on my lunch breaks at the diner, on the bus, late into the night until the words swam in front of my eyes. I applied for every scholarship and grant I could find. My professors noticed. One of them, a woman named Mrs. Gable, pulled me aside after class. "Olivia," she said, her eyes kind but direct, "you have more drive than any student I've ever had. What are you running toward? A future, I told her. One that I own. She helped me with my applications. When I got a full scholarship to the state university, I cried for the first time in years. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of victory. I was getting out. I was building my own ladder, rung by painful rung. The higher I climbed, the smaller they became. The university was a new world. No one knew my story. I was just Olivia Hayes, the student who always sat in the front row and never missed a deadline. I majored in business with a focus on real estate. I loved the idea of building things, of creating homes, solid, permanent structures that couldn't be taken away. After graduation, I got a job at a small real estate firm. I was relentless. I worked weekends, took on the clients no one else wanted, and learned every corner of the market. My first commission check wasn't huge, but when I held it in my hand, it felt like a medal. It was mine. I had earned it. Slowly, carefully, I saved. I lived in a tiny apartment, drove a 10-year-old car, and put every spare dollar away. My first investment was a small, run-down duplex. I spent months fixing it up myself, painting walls and patching floors after work. When I finally rented it out, the feeling of that passive income, money working for me, was intoxicating. One property became 2, then 5. I started my own development company. I bought land, built houses, and created communities. I was good at it. I had an eye for potential and a work ethic that outmatched everyone. By the time I was 33, 15 years after my father closed the door on me, I was more than successful. I was wealthy. I owned a beautiful home with large windows that let in the light. It sat on a quiet, tree-lined street, a world away from the crowded house of my childhood. It was a silent, peaceful space. It was my sanctuary. I never flaunted my success. I never sent them a letter or tried to make them see what they'd lost. Their memory had faded into a dull ache, a scar that reminded me of what I had survived. I had built a life so full and so secure that they had no place in it. I thought I would never see them again. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday evening. A light rain was falling outside, tapping against the windows of my study. I was looking over some blueprints, a cup of tea steaming beside me. My home was quiet, just the way I liked it. Then, a knock echoed through the house. Firm. Urgent. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the front door, a slight sense of annoyance flickering through me. I peered through the peephole, and my heart stopped. It was them. My father, David, stood in the center, looking older and smaller than I remembered. His hair was gray, and his shoulders were slumped. My mother was beside him, clutching his arm, her face etched with anxiety. And behind them stood my brother, Mark, and my sister, Chloe. They looked uncomfortable, avoiding my gaze. For a moment, I couldn't move. It was like seeing ghosts on my doorstep. 15 years of silence, and here they were, standing under the warm light of my porch, my house. My first instinct was to slam the door, to pretend I wasn't home. But the determined part of me, the part that had clawed its way up from nothing, took over. I was not that scared 18-year-old girl anymore. I was a woman who owned the ground she stood on. I took a deep breath, turned the deadbolt, and opened the door. I said nothing. I just stood there, watching them. My father's eyes scanned the grand foyer behind me, the high ceilings, the polished hardwood floors. I saw a flash of something in his eyes. Was it shock? Envy? Olivia, my mother said, her voice barely a whisper. Can we come in? The rain was picking up. They looked cold and wet and pathetic. I stepped aside. Fine, I said, my voice flat. Come in. They walked into my home like strangers, their eyes darting around, taking in the art on the walls, the expensive furniture. It was clear this was not what they had expected. We stood in awkward silence in the living room. I didn't offer them a seat. I just crossed my arms, waiting. Finally, my father cleared his throat. You've done well for yourself, Olivia, he said. The words sounded forced, unnatural. I have, I replied, offering no more. We've had some hard times, my mother chimed in, wringing her hands. Your father's construction business. The market turned. We lost everything. Mark, my brother, finally spoke up, his voice resentful. The company went bankrupt. We're losing the house. The house. The one they threw me out of. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach, but my face remained a blank mask. I just listened. My father, the man who had roared at me, who had called me nothing, couldn't quite meet my eyes. He stared at a point just over my shoulder. We have nowhere to go, Olivia. We heard about your success, your company. You know the market. You have connections. You have money. There it was. The real reason they were here. Not for an apology. Not to see if I was okay. They were here with their hands out. We need your help, he said, the words finally tumbling out. He was begging. The man whose pride was once so towering, the man who had erased me from his life, was standing in my house, begging me for a lifeline. We're family, my mother added, her eyes pleading. You have to help us. We have nowhere else to turn. The word family hung in the air between us, a bitter, ironic joke. They had stripped me of that word 15 years ago. They didn't get to use it now. I let the silence stretch out, thick and heavy. I watched them squirm. I saw the desperation on their faces, but I didn't see a hint of remorse. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry they had gotten caught in a storm and needed my harbor. I looked at each of them. My mother, who stood by and did nothing. My siblings, who hid in their rooms. And my father, who had pronounced me dead to him. My voice, when I finally spoke, was calm and quiet. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I have a question, I said, looking directly at my father, and I want you to answer it honestly. He nodded, eager, thinking he was about to get what he wanted. Did you come here for me? Or for what I built without you? The silence that followed was my answer. It was absolute. My mother's face fell. My brother looked down at the floor. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. There was no lie he could tell that would cover the truth. They didn't want me. They never had. They wanted my success. They wanted my resources. They wanted a bailout from the daughter they had thrown away like trash. In that moment, any lingering pain, any last shred of hope for a family that might one day want me back, dissolved. It was gone. All I felt was a strange, hollow peace. The final cut had been made. I walked over to the front door and opened it. The rain was still falling. I think you should leave now, I said. My mother gasped. Olivia, you can't be serious. We're your family. We have nothing. You had me, I said, my voice steady. You had a daughter who loved you, and you threw her out in the dark. You made your choice 15 years ago. My father's face hardened again, a flicker of the old rage returning. After everything I did for you for 18 years, you did what you were supposed to. Do, I interrupted, my voice sharp for the first time. And then you took it all back in one night. You told me I was nothing to you. I just finally decided to believe you. I looked at all of them, one by one. You didn't come here to fix what you broke. You came here to use me. The answer is no. My mother started to sob, but this time, the sound didn't move me. My father stared at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of shock and hatred. He had come here expecting the lost little girl, the one who would be so grateful for a crumb of his attention that she would give him anything. He didn't know the woman I had become. You threw me out once, I said softly. Don't think. You can walk back in now. And with that, I closed the door on their faces. I turned the lock, the click echoing in the quiet hall. It was the same sound I had heard 15 years ago. But this time, it wasn't the sound of abandonment. It was the sound of freedom. I didn't watch them leave. I walked back to my study, my heart steady and calm. There was no anger, no sadness, just a profound, quiet peace. I had faced my ghosts, and I had won. That night I sat in my home, the one I had built with my own 2 hands, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. Not for them, but for myself. For the scared girl who survived the shelters. For the tired student who studied through the night. For the determined woman who never, ever gave up. The secret they used to destroy me became the fire that built me. They thought my father's blood was what made me worthy of a home, of a family. They were wrong. My worth was never tied to them. It was always inside me, waiting to be forged in the fire of their rejection. I didn't need them to become someone. I had to lose them to become myself. If you've ever been cast out, remember, sometimes being rejected is the first step to becoming unstoppable. Your worth is not determined by who claims you, but by the life you build for yourself. Like, subscribe, and share your story in the comments.